Morning in the bustling city center. Sunlight spilled across rows of glass towers, gleaming like freshly polished mirrors. On the crowded street, streams of people hurried along in an endless rhythm. Office workers in crisp shirts, students carrying laptops, tourists with cameras snapping at the urban buzz. Among them stood Solara Café, its bright sun-shaped logo glowing over the glass doors. Solara wasn't just any cafe. It was a nationwide chain, now reaching across Europe and Asia. Inside, golden light from hanging lamps warmed the space. Exposed brick walls met pale wooden tables, balancing modernity with comfort. At the bar, the espresso machine hissed rhythmically, like the steady breath of the morning rush. Young employees, mostly white, hurried back and forth in pale green uniforms, trays in hand. The chatter of orders, the clatter of keyboards, and the gentle hum of jazz blended into the city's morning song. Then the bell above the door chimed. The air shifted as a stranger stepped inside. An old white man, Arthur Whitmore, in his 70s, crossed the threshold. His hair was wild and white, his skin gray with grime, beard unkempt. His clothes were torn and soiled, a frayed gray coat hanging heavy on his back. His gait was bent and weary, as if carrying the weight of all his years. Arthur's cloudy eyes searched the room as he clung to the counter. Voice raspy, "One espresso, please." The words struck the polished space of Solara Café like a discordant note. A few customers raised their brows, a barista smirked. Arthur fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a handful of plastic cards, an expired library card, a faded grocery coupon, scraps with no value. "Sir, are you paying with play cards?" one young employee sneered. Laughter bubbled up. A group of students whipped out their phones to record the scene. Grinning as though it were a street performance, a middle-aged man whispered to his friend, "Morning comedy, a homeless man asking for espresso." Arthur froze. His bony hands tightened around the useless cards. Confusion and shame etched into his face, like a lost child mocked for trying to belong. Heavy footsteps cut through the noise. From the office emerged William Harris, the 40-year-old branch manager, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair slicked with gel, white shirt and scarlet tie pristine, his square jaw locked into a scowl. William was infamous across the chain for being harsh, even cruel. His voice cracked like a whip. "Old man, out, now. This isn't a place for your games. We don't serve people like you." The cafe fell silent. The earlier giggles died away, leaving only the weight of expectation. Arthur lowered his head, lips trembling soundlessly. "Wait a second. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us." And then another voice broke the tension. Warm, steady, not loud but enough to shift the air. "Don't worry, I'll pay for him." It was Aisha Brown, 23, a waitress. A small black woman with glowing brown skin and determined dark eyes, her hair tied back in a neat curl, her green uniform wrinkled from long hours. Yet she stood upright, gaze unwavering. Aisha stepped forward, swiped her battered debit card across the reader. The machine beeped. She smiled at Arthur and repeated gently, "Don't worry, I'll pay for you." The cafe froze. All eyes turned to her, stunned. William's face darkened with rage. Murmurs rippled among staff and customers. Helping a lunatic. Figures it's always her kind sticking together. Black and homeless. Aisha heard them all. She didn't bow her head. She stood tall, sliding the steaming espresso across the counter toward Arthur. His trembling hands closed around the cup, and for a moment, his clouded eyes flickered with a fragile spark. There was something unspoken binding the two of them now. An invisible thread of dignity stretched between the most despised and the most overlooked. William's fists clenched, his face flushed crimson, his voice cut like steel. "Aisha, you'll pay for this stunt." But Aisha didn't flinch. She only bowed her head slightly toward Arthur and said, soft but firm, "Drink it while it's hot." The cafe sat in strange silence. The espresso machine hissed on, steady and indifferent. Yet in every heart watching, the moment carved itself deep, two figures standing against a sea of contempt, holding on to something greater than pride, simple, stubborn humanity. People in the cafe that day kept whispering long after the scene ended. They couldn't understand why Aisha Brown, the black waitress, would foolishly step in and pay for a ragged old man who looked no different from a vagrant. But Aisha knew exactly why. Her action wasn't sudden or reckless. It came from recognition, an invisible thread she had felt for a long time. Every night after her shift at Solara Cafe, Aisha would walk back to her tiny rented room in the old quarter. The route passed over a concrete bridge crossing a sluggish canal. And right under that bridge, in the flickering yellow of a dying street lamp, a guitar would play, aching, tender, hauntingly beautiful, as if it could reach into the wound inside one's chest. For months, Aisha had listened to that music, sometimes mournful as midnight sorrow, sometimes bright like dawn breaking. To her it was a quiet embrace after a long day. The man playing guitar was none other than old Arthur Whitmore, his back hunched over a wooden crate, the guitar battered, strings worn thin. His gnarled fingers still pressed out chords with patience, not for money, not for an audience, but because the music was his lifeblood. Aisha herself once had music in her future. At 18, she was accepted into one of the state's most prestigious music schools, a place the wealthy white kids called paradise for the elite. The acceptance letter had made her and her mother, Martha Brown, weep together in their leaky kitchen. Martha, a laundress, had given up everything to raise her daughter's dream. But the joy didn't last. Martha was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. Tuition became impossible. Hospital bills took its place. Aisha dropped out, working any job she could, waiting tables, cleaning offices, scrubbing restaurant floors. Every night she sat by her mother's bed, holding her hand, tapping out imaginary rhythms on her thigh so music wouldn't leave her. A year later, Martha was gone. Aisha stood at her bedside, clutching the scarf her mother left behind, her heart split open. From then on, she had no family, no anchor. Now she rented a room no bigger than 10 square meters, ceiling stained, walls peeling, the bed creaking at every turn. She juggled 2 or 3 jobs just to afford rent, food, utilities, and the hospital debt still lingering. Music, her dream, was now a luxury. As a child, she'd been mocked for that dream. The wealthy white kids sneered. Poor black girl and music. Piano and violin are for nobles. For us, not you. The taunts scarred her. But they also made her treasure every sound, every melody even more. And after her mother died, it was Arthur's guitar beneath the bridge that pulled her back from despair. His music was like an unseen hand lifting her from the pit. Night after night she paused, letting the chords soothe her spirit. Sometimes she thought, my life isn't so different from homelessness now. But then she realized, maybe homelessness isn't the worst thing, as long as there's music. So in Aisha's eyes, Arthur was never a pitiful drifter. He was a street artist, an artist she respected. Paying for his coffee wasn't pity, it was gratitude. In the days that followed, Arthur lingered near Solara Cafe. He never bought anything, just sat at an empty corner table, watching people stream in and out. Sometimes out of boredom, he folded paper napkins into little birds and flowers, leaving them behind. To customers it was trash. To Arthur, it was play. The last spark of joy in old age. Manager William Harris saw it and exploded. He ordered Aisha, "You, clean up this garbage. The old man's junk doesn't belong here." Her white colleagues chimed in, sneering. "Yeah, your buddy's mess. Go deal with it. Careful. You'll be out folding paper on the street with him soon." Aisha bit her lip, silently picking up each fragile napkin creation and dropping it into the trash. They weighed nothing, but felt heavy in her hands. She didn't argue. She needed this job. Soon, William and the others began exploiting her loyalty. Whenever Arthur appeared, they dumped the dirtiest tasks on her, scrubbing restrooms outside her shift, hauling heavy trash bins, wiping sticky spills at the bar. "You like covering for that old man?" William smirked. "Then carry the burden." Aisha endured it all, sweat soaking her back, her rough palms stinging. She never protested. She knew losing this job meant losing her lifeline. That night, after her exhausting shift, she walked past the bridge again. Arthur was there, back bent, hands coaxing music into the cool air. Notes floated like ripples across the dark water, seeping into her chest. She stopped. a faint smile tugging her lips. And in that moment she understood why she had stepped forward in the café, why she had paid for him despite the ridicule. Because to her, Arthur wasn't a burden. He was the last light in her shadowed life. From that day on, Arthur kept returning to the café, and Aisha, though pushed into harder, dirtier labor, silently endured, carrying it as her way of repaying the music that once saved her heart. It was a weekend morning, and Solara Café was busier than usual. Children chattered as their parents guided them to tables, their laughter mingling with the soft jazz flowing from the speakers. Golden light glowed over the café, and the aroma of roasted coffee beans filled the air. It seemed like it would be a peaceful morning, until the glass doors opened. Arthur Whitmore appeared once more. The old man, well into his 70s, shuffled in with a hunched back, a faded coat streaked with dirt, and shoes worn down at the heels as though he had walked a road without end. His cloudy eyes wandered the room, lost as his trembling hands placed a few worn coins on the counter. Children screamed. One clutched its mother, sobbing at the sight of the frail, disheveled figure with tangled hair and a dirt-streaked face. Their cries drowned the soft jazz. The cheerful atmosphere fractured. A woman shook her head and pulled her child away. A boy tugged at his father's sleeve, crying out, "I'm scared. He's so dirty." Arthur froze, shame burning red across his withered face. His hands shook harder as he lowered his head. From the back office, William Harris, the branch manager, stormed out. Hair slicked with gel, tie cinched tight, his square face already flushed with fury. His voice cracked like a whip. "Old man, get out! This cafe isn't a shelter for frightening children." Arthur stumbled back, but William didn't stop. His voice grew louder, feeding off the audience. "We don't need this nuisance. And you, Aisha." He jabbed a finger toward the black waitress standing stiff by the counter. "This is your doing. If you hadn't played the pity game the other day, none of this would be happening." Aisha Brown froze, her lips pressed tight, her chest aching. She wanted to step forward, to steady Arthur, but the glare of her manager, the whispers of her white coworkers kept her pinned in place. Too frail to resist, Arthur sagged under William's voice. "Out!" Shoved toward the door, Arthur nearly collapsed. The hot espresso he had just managed to order toppled and burst across the floor, staining it a dark, ugly brown. The children stopped crying, but clung to their parents, wide-eyed. Aisha clenched her fists, helplessness burning in her veins. To her, Arthur wasn't a filthy drifter. He was the guitarist whose music had once kept her alive. But her lowly position, and the constant shadow of racism, held her in chains. Arthur shuffled out. His figure vanished through the glass, leaving behind a heavy silence. And then, just 5 minutes later, the hum of a luxury engine rolled outside. Heads turned. A sleek black car stopped in front of Solara Café. Out stepped a man in a navy suit, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, his presence radiating authority. Everyone recognized him at once. Thomas Green, the regional director, William's direct superior, one of the most powerful men in the entire chain. The staff went pale. William fumbled at his tie, throat dry. But what stunned them even more was the man walking beside Thomas. Arthur. The old man who had just been humiliated and expelled, now entered the cafe at the director's side, his cloudy eyes calm, his pace unhurried. A ripple of shock coursed through the cafe. Thomas raised his voice, clear and commanding. "I am here to inspect this branch, and to introduce a very special guest." He gestured to Arthur. "This is Arthur Whitmore, the founder of Solara Café, the very man who built the chain you are all drinking from today." The room froze. A spoon slipped and clinked against a cup. William's jaw dropped, his face drained of blood. Customers who had been recording quickly lowered their phones, hands trembling. Thomas continued, "Mr. Whitmore is not only a pioneer in business, but also a patron of the arts. He has invested much of his fortune into nurturing young musicians." Gasps rippled through the cafe. Moments ago they had sneered at him as a vagrant. Now they stared at the very man who created the world they were sitting in. Arthur sat down, his voice gravelly but steady. "I know you see me as filthy. But when I live like this, I am free. I hear music more clearly. I feel life more deeply. Money and fame chained me too long. Now, I only want to be myself." His gaze shifted toward Aisha, who stood rooted at the counter. His cloudy eyes glinted. That day, I had lost my bank card. I entered with nothing but coins, and yet a young woman paid for me without hesitation. Not knowing who I was, that made me curious. So I watched her. I saw her mocked, burdened, treated unfairly, but she never lost her honesty. She never lost her kindness. All eyes swung to Aisha. Arthur nodded toward Thomas. The director straightened and announced, "From this moment, any act of prejudice, discrimination, or misconduct within this branch, or any branch, will be punished severely. Solara Café has no place for contempt." William's body sagged, sweat pouring down his face. He stammered, "Mr. Whitmore, I didn't know—" Arthur cut him short, voice firm. "You don't need to know. You only need to remember what it means to be human." His words sliced through William's hollow pride. The manager bowed his head, trembling. Arthur turned to Aisha. His eyes softened. "My girl, I have an offer. Would you like to become manager of this branch? Not because you helped me, but because you know what's right." The café seemed to hold its breath. Gasps filled the air. Staff, customers, all waited. Aisha's heart pounded. Any other person would leap at such an offer. But she lifted her gaze to Arthur's and whispered, "If I could, would you teach me to play the guitar instead?" Arthur blinked. The café froze. No one had expected that. She didn't ask for money, nor power, nor position, only music. In that instant, Arthur understood why he had felt such a bond with her. Music was the thread tying their souls together. A faint smile spread across his weathered face, the rare, gentle smile of a man who had finally been seen for who he truly was. After that fateful morning, everything inside Solara Café changed. No one dared mock Aisha Brown again. Arthur Whitmore's declaration, the founder himself, a billionaire everyone thought had vanished, forced every employee to bow their heads in shame. William Harris, the manager who had humiliated and exploited Aisha, was quickly transferred and soon after disappeared from the entire chain. Aisha accepted the offer to become branch manager, but first she had to complete a 3-month training program. And so, the new name tag rested on her chest, engraved with Aisha Brown, branch manager. At first she stumbled, unsure how to lead an entire staff, but step by step, with patience and fairness, she earned back respect. For the first time in years, Aisha no longer lived in constant fear of unpaid bills. Her salary allowed her to settle her mother's hospital debts, move out of the cramped, peeling apartment into a modest but bright flat. In the evenings, after work, she could finally play her favorite music again, tapping rhythms on the wooden table with her fingers, a habit reborn with new life. But the true turning point came when Arthur kept his promise. He didn't just hand her a position. He quietly sponsored her enrollment in a formal music program. One afternoon, Arthur arrived with his battered old guitar slung over his shoulder, smiling gently. "Aisha, I once told you, I only wanted to hear music that was real. I see the same in you. Now you must study, seriously, so music is no longer an abandoned dream." Aisha's eyes welled with tears. After years of being told a poor black girl knows nothing of music, she now stood before a man who had abandoned wealth to reclaim freedom in music. She nodded, voice trembling, "I won't waste another chance." Time passed. 5 years later, the name Aisha Brown began appearing in music magazines. No longer a cafe waitress, she was now a young composer. Her works performed in concert halls across New York, London, Paris. Her music carried the breath of her own life, beginning with mournful, low notes, then suddenly soaring like a cry for freedom. Listeners felt a hidden strength in each piece, painful yet proud enough to stir their very souls. Critics said, "Her music feels like wounds healing themselves, making us weep and smile at the same time." She was offered many opportunities. An international label even asked her to become their artistic director, with an immense salary, but she refused. "My dream," she said in an interview, is the one thing I can never put aside once I've touched it with my whole heart. I can manage a café, I can handle finances, but my soul would die if I left music. By then, Arthur Whitmore was much older. He no longer appeared at investment conferences, no longer sat in boardrooms, but he appeared quietly backstage at Aisha's concerts, sitting in the last row, his cloudy eyes glowing whenever her melodies rose. He once told her, voice slow and firm, "I abandoned music for a lifetime chasing wealth. But you are different. Don't let anything drag you away from this path." Aisha smiled, squeezing his rough, aged hand. They didn't need labels, mentor, patron, or family. They were simply two souls who had rescued each other in a world full of prejudice. One night in Berlin, Aisha stood on stage. The orchestra behind her waited. The hall was full. She held up her newest score, whispering to the one person in her heart, "This concerto, I wrote it for you, Arthur." The music began. Violins stretched long notes, piano joined in, and then unexpectedly, an acoustic guitar sang in the middle movement, a deliberate tribute to the frail old man she once saw beneath a bridge, strumming for no audience but the night. In the shadows of the last row, Arthur closed his eyes. A faint smile touched his lips, as though a lifetime of burdens had been lifted by a single melody. When the final chord faded, the hall erupted in a standing ovation. But for Aisha, the applause wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the tear-lit glow in the eyes of the man who had once walked away from music, only to see it reborn in her. Arthur and Aisha were not father and daughter, not exactly teacher and student, not boss and employee, not business partners. They were two flames rekindling each other, one nearly extinguished by poverty and prejudice, the other smothered by wealth and vanity. Now, both burned quietly, steadily, against the noise of the world. Message. The story of Aisha and Arthur reminds us that kindness is never meaningless. A single small act, born from the heart, can change a destiny, sometimes even reignite a dream thought long extinguished. Music bound two souls from different worlds, proving that human worth is not measured by status or appearance, but by sincerity and courage. In a society thick with prejudice, sometimes all it takes is one person daring to live authentically and do what is right. And from that single choice, the light of human dignity can spread, healing, uplifting, and redeeming more hearts than we ever imagine.